In the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, the Noldor are a group of elves that are rebelling against the Valar, who are angelic beings who govern the world on behalf of God. And they are refusing the Valar's request for them to stay in the blessed realm Valinor in order to go back to Middle-earth to pursue Morgoth, the enemy, because they want revenge for his killing of their leader, and because they want the Silmarils back, which are some holy jewels that Morgoth has stolen from them. When the Valar request that they come back, and they receive the reply from the Noldor that the Noldor are going to continue on no matter what curses and suffering may come because of it, but also that the deeds that they do will live in song until the last days. The king of the Valar, Manwë, responds with this quote: "Thus, even as Eros spoke to us, shall beauty not before conceived be brought into Ea, and evil yet be good to have been." Now basically what Manwë is saying here is this idea that the evil that a character may choose or encounter, though it remains evil, it can still be turned to some good end by whatever providential force is in the story, whether it's explicitly said to be God or if it's just a little more vaguely alluded to. I've really been thinking a lot about this theme in conjunction with a lot of stories I've been reading lately, and I think it seems to me that it's like almost ingrained in our cultural understanding of the world, because there's just so many stories that we just can't help expressing it in. As a Catholic, I see this theme have its source and culminate in the true story, the story of salvation history, and in the idea that we're even more blessed than we were before the fall because we have been given a Savior who has drawn us even closer to God than we were before. And I think this is most beautifully expressed in the Exultet, that great hymn that's sung at the beginning of the Easter Vigil that I cry every time I hear it because it's just so beautiful and so poignant. When it says, "Oh, happy fault that gave us so great, so glorious a Redeemer." And then not only do you have that overarching display of that theme, but you also have a lot of smaller instances of it within the Bible. For example, in the story of the Passion, a lot of those characters that made those evil choices, like Judas or Pilate, for example, you have their choices being turned to the good end of the salvific act of Christ's Passion. And then you also have the Old Testament. You have stories in there that sort of foreshadow this theme on a smaller scale. For example, you have Joseph in Egypt, who through the jealousy of his brothers was sold into slavery in Egypt and went through a lot of suffering and pain and ended up in prison and everything. But that just put him in the right place at the right time to be able to interpret some dreams that predicted a famine. And he was able to save not only Egypt through this interpreting the dreams, but he also saved his own family because they came to Egypt in order to find food once the famine started. An author who really spends a lot of time exploring this theme is J.R.R. Tolkien. In fact, Lord of the Rings is kind of an extended study of this theme. Even the main plot, the quest to destroy the ring, it's basically this doubtful, almost impossible task that in the end is only fulfilled through the treachery of the character Gollum. Another example of this theme is the Ents, the tree herds of the forest, who are difficult to rouse to action but who go to war against Saruman to stop all the destruction he's caused in the area. And the only reason this happens is because Merry and Pippin, two hobbits, are captured by orcs and carried across Middle-earth and end up escaping right near the forest. And they're able to meet the Ents and help influence them to go to war against Saruman. So, even though Merry and Pippin had to endure a lot of suffering and pain during their captivity, this evil was brought to a good end by their helping the Ents defeat Saruman. So this theme is also explored even at a more fundamental level in Tolkien's creation story called the Ainulindalë, which is in the Silmarillion. And basically what happens is God, called Eru in this story, creates the world through a song, and he has all of the angelic beings he has created, the Ainur, sing this song with him to create the world. But one of the Ainu, Melkor, decides he wants to sing his own tune that's kind of going contrary to Eru's will. But every time he tries to go off and do his own thing, Eru just weaves this theme back into his own theme. And so he basically brings back the evil of going contrary to his will back into the story that he is creating of the world. So he causes the evil to be turned back to a good. So that's a symbolic way that Tolkien represents this theme in the fundamental creation story of his world. While Tolkien explores this theme consciously in his work, another story, Halo, explores this theme sort of almost as a side effect of another theme which is more explicit, and that's the theme of the end justifies the means. Now these two themes are related to each other, but they have subtle differences that kind of lead them to very different moral conclusions. The lore of Halo exemplifies what I'd like to call the happy fault theme through the story of the Spartan twos, who are children kidnapped at the age of 6 and brutally trained and biologically augmented in these dangerous and sometimes fatal procedures in order to become super soldiers for the purpose of combating political dissension and rebellion in Earth's interstellar colonies. A couple years into this program, humanity runs into a highly advanced alien empire called the Covenant, whose religion causes them to begin a genocidal war against the humans. And basically, the Spartans are one of the only thing that keeps humanity from being completely steamrolled flat almost immediately. Then, in the middle of that war, humanity also runs into another existential threat called the Flood, which is basically this parasitic zombie-like infestation that turns whatever it infects into itself and basically wants to convert the entire galaxy. These two threats, plus an ancient AI who's convinced that the only way to stop the Flood is by using a super weapon to kill all life in the galaxy, are stopped by the player character John 117, also known as the Master Chief, who is one of the Spartan twos. So the idea that the Spartans are destined to save humanity is discussed a little bit in the lore. In the prequel book to the first video game, The Fall of Reach, it talks about when John first hears of the Covenant, and he thinks to himself, this was the threat he and the other Spartans had been training for all their lives. He was certain of it. Not scattered rebels, pirates, or political dissidents. So there is this sort of idea that the order and experience of his life is destined towards some good, but it never really talks about much beyond that about what power might be directing it. It also does bring up the idea of luck as a sort of power that is affecting how John is successful at everything, but it also never really goes into more detail about that either. So later on, we get, in later stories, we get discussions about prehistoric aliens meddling in the destiny of humanity and stuff like that. But I don't really want to talk about that because I want to focus on this idea of, like, the Spartans as they were first conceived in the story. And also, I don't think that those prehistoric alien races, the forerunners or the precursors, could really be considered like that providential element, because they're just as fallen as humanity. They make just as many bad decisions as humans. So the happy fault theme is in the Halo story. However, the focus is more on the theme of the ends justifying the means. And I think it's really important to highlight the subtle differences between these two themes. The key point, this is very important to focus on, is the idea that in the happy fault theme, the evil that allows the good to occur is not willed for the purpose of causing that good to happen. In the happy fault theme, this evil already pre-exists and then is turned to a good end by whatever providential element is in the story. This evil is already there because it is the result of a free will choice made by a character. This theme is just emphasizing how providence allows the world to move as a result of this action having taken place already. In Halo, the question that tends to be asked more often is this question of the ends justifying the means. For example, at the beginning of Halo 4, they have a discussion about whether or not the Spartan 2 program was justified. The creator of the Spartan 2 program, Dr. Halsey, tries to defend her actions by saying that her work saved the human race. However, the thing that she's missing here is the idea that even though the actions of the Spartans after the fact saved humanity and caused good to happen, the act of her kidnapping those 6-year-olds and subjecting them to all of that suffering is not a good action. So this question is also asked in regards to the Halos. In the first game, the main question is whether or not they should fire the Halo they find in the game. Now, these Halos were created tens of thousands of years ago by the aliens who controlled the galaxy at the time, the Forerunners, when they were fighting the Flood. They believed that the only way to defeat the Flood was to create these super weapons to kill all life in the galaxy in order to deprive the Flood of its food supply. The AI caretaker of the Halo installation found in this game tries to get John to make this same decision, to fire the Halo to kill all life in the galaxy in order to stop the Flood from spreading. The end of the game can be seen as a rejection of this idea, because John blows up the Halo in order to stop it from firing. In the Silmarillion, after Manwë's comments about evil being good to have been, another Vala, Mandos, makes sure to emphasize that that evil remains evil. The evil done is not justified, but to those who have hope, and here I'm talking about, as Tolkien would say, Estel, not Amdir, as in, like, the hope in, like, this, like, fundamental good that goes beyond the world. To the people who have this type of hope, there is a sense that this evil is no longer just meaningless pain, that it can be there for a purpose. So I sit here in this totally meta circumstance right now, because right now the coronavirus is happening, and I, like a bunch of other people, I'm just kind of stuck at home, unable to go about the general daily business of my life. And at the same time, I've been having all of these ideas like floating around in my brain for the past several years. On top of that, I've been suffering from a lot of like social anxiety and shyness that's really makes it hard for me to express myself and to really like interact in an effective way with the world. And so I decided that I needed a way to train my brain to do that a little better. And I came up with the idea of vlogging. And of course, going about my daily life, it was really easy to like make up excuses for why I was too busy to start doing this. But of course, now that the coronavirus has caused all my daily scheduled events to be shut down, I finally really have no excuse. So this is my first video in this experiment. So that's yet another example of blessings that can come out of terrible pain. Thanks for watching my video. I'd love to hear what you have to think about what I've been discussing. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Bye!